And a lot of what we've done originates from that framework. Let us bring it into context in terms of strategic decision making. If I now have to look at all of this holistically, yes, I have an external environment that we know, and we agree that that external environment is volatile and it changes all the time. I also know that I have internal information that's fed into the organization that can either be through business information systems or it can be done manually. But you're constantly, in some way or another, as managers, you're aware of what do I have in terms of skills, financial strength, campaigns that's running. You have that bits and pieces of information. And this doesn't change all that much, because this is very much based on your planning, budgeting. What changes all the time is that. So what we need to try and do is, by means of a business intelligence system, to try and take strategic decision making and strategic planning out of the annual space and change it in real time. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that I need to have a new strategy every day? No, that's not what it means. But what it does say is it's becoming a little bit difficult to have my strategic planning session only once a year, because things change too quickly. And it takes too long for me to gather all this information. By the time I've gathered and assimilated all this information, there's new information already. So I need systems to try and update this in real time. Because what do I want to see? Well, I want to have an indication of whether I should continue with my strategy or not. And I want to have it daily. I don't want to find out that I'm on the wrong track. I want to know immediately when I'm on the wrong track. So I need a tool, a framework, a guideline, through which I can tailor my approach to fit the complexity and the context in terms of where I'm finding myself. My example with my daughter and my son. I need a framework, I need guidance. I will not know what to do the first time, or will probably phone my father and say to him, hey, when I was a stubborn teenager, what was your trick? How did you deal with me? So somewhere I need a framework, guidance. That's what we're trying to give you here. Giving that to executives so that they can tailor their approach. Find out what the how-to is. This is just a simulation of some of the software that we have already. If the circle there in the middle is green, it gives you an indication that yes, everything is okay in terms of the latest information, and you can carry on with your strategy. If it turns yellow, to use the metaphor of a traffic light, you need to worry a little bit. There might be some early warning signs that you need to consider in terms of continuing with your strategy. And then, of course, if you get the red light, you need to stop, regroup, replan, gather the additional information. The question again is, how do I do that? And why is this so challenging? Well, in a nutshell, the reason why it's challenging is the way in which you've always made a decision is the preferred way in which you tend to want to make a decision. Now, when it comes to executives, because for years we've been taught that the environment is stable, we have become accustomed to making decisions as if there's order and predictability. Order and predictability, as it states there, up to a large extent, has become a fundamental assumption of organizational theory. And yes, there is order, and there is predictability. There's not total chaos as we're sitting here. There's not necessarily the challenges that I had in Khartoum. But internationally, the levels of order and the levels of predictability is becoming less. Not necessarily because of chaos. We're not talking civil war, but because of the fast, random, and unpredictable changes of customers. Today they want this, tomorrow they want that. There's influences from the YouTubes and the social medias where you have trends that overnight evolve, and I need to respond to those trends. So the order and predictability is becoming less. We need something to help us to cope with that. This decision-making tool is but one of those. If I look at the environment and I categorize it, it means I'm trying to simplify it. Now, listen very carefully to what I'm going to say now. There's nothing wrong with wanting to simplify something. Maybe there where you're sitting right now, you're hoping that I should simplify what I'm saying. Maybe sometimes you find yourself in a meeting and things are just way too complex. And you ask me, please explain that to me in simple terms. Or maybe you've been in a meeting with somebody and say, look, just say this to me in a simple manner. There's nothing wrong with asking for that. However, ladies and gentlemen, my mode of thinking, my mode of taking a decision when something is simple is different from what it should be when something is complicated or complex or chaotic. So yes, I can take something very complex and simplify it, but be careful to then employ the mode of simplification when taking the decision. Let me put it in English to you. This is the framework, known as the synonym framework. We talk about it as, or we refer to it as the intelligence matrix. Now look at the 4 different contexts. And these contexts, based on the research of Snowden and Boone, all exist in managing a business. I have simple, chaotic, complex, complicated, and disorder. Disorder really comes into play when it's almost impossible for you to clearly identify which of these 4 contexts prevail at a specific point in time. And then you would call that disorder. Very similar to what I experienced in Heckroodt. Now, let's talk about chaotic first. Each one of these contexts has got a certain domain. So when we look at chaotic, we talk about the domain of rapid response. If this fire alarm goes off right now, everybody will be dashing for that door without thinking. If you hear a couple of shots going off in the store, maybe there's an armed robbery, you will hit the floor straight away without thinking. So when you are in a chaotic context, you act immediately. That's the domain you're in. And then you sense and response and respond. But there's no time to think there really. Let's look at simple, known as the domain for best practice. So if you still believe that the environment is simple, ordered, predictable, you will categorize it and you will segment it. That's the approach. I will sense, yeah, it's fairly straightforward. I will categorize politics, economy, buyers, suppliers, and that will then enable me to respond, make certain decisions. However, if things are not simple, they might be complex. Complex is known as the so-called domain of emergence. Now, it's a difficult one, but it's where most businesses find themselves. It's where things change all the time. We talk about the system's complexity. It changes all the time. There's constant change. Now there I can't just act. I can't categorize it either because it's moving. It's dynamic. So what I tend to need to do is I need to probe, experiment, engage, then sense and then respond. If you look at this, a simple way for me to compare the two is the P-square framework is almost more applicable there as opposed to here where you could probably still use the conventional pestle framework. And then the last one there is complicated. Complex, complicated, close to one another, however with a significant difference. When things are complicated, I'll call in the expert. In other words, you're driving your car, you hear a noise in the bonnet. If you're anything like me, you will not stop, pop the hood and fix it. But I will know something is wrong because I can hear a funny noise. So what do? I sense that something is wrong, but I then take it to an expert. Take it to the car, the place where I can fix it, and I have a mechanic looking at the engine, and he gives me a couple of options and costs in terms of fixing it. Each one of these contexts are real for business. So this is what I meant when I said, if you want to simplify something because it's complicated, it's fine, you can simplify it for purposes of understanding, but you cannot follow this approach to decision making if something is actually complex or complicated. Chaotic is fairly easy, it speaks for itself. Let's look at some of the characteristics very quickly. Simple, as I said, stable, clear. Here the answer is forthcoming. Now, where you find most of your simple context is actually in the business. If you have something like process order fulfillment, it's a fairly simple, straightforward, stable process. If there's something that goes wrong somewhere, you're not getting the right product or the margin isn't accurate and so forth, you can take that simple process which is stable, ordered, predictable, break it into smaller bits, categorize it, and identify where the problem is, respond to it. Chaotic, spoke about that. The challenge with chaotic is the cause and effect patterns shift constantly. So if there's a fire in the passageway, we're all running that way because we don't know where the fire is going to hit next. It's not really a pattern that can be predicted. Complicated? Well, I think I gave a good enough example. There's the motor vehicle example. And emergence. Emergence, in terms of complexity, is almost like a very nice example there that Snowden and Boone also uses to compare Ferrari with the rainforest. You can take a Ferrari apart and you can put it back together because the configuration is ordered. So in that sense, it's complicated. But if I unroot the entire rainforest, I can't necessarily put everything back again in the same order because there's constant change, weather patterns, flocks of birds. It's something else. It emerges and changes all the time. That's the difference between the two. That's really where our complexity lies. Okay, let me give you a practical example. I am going to do some questions and answers afterwards, but we are about 15 minutes away from it, so yeah, okay. Let me give you, to end off, let me make what I've been talking about a little bit more practical. I very quickly just want to share this case study with you. It's an organization that we have done this entire exercise with and made the following discoveries and asked them whether we can use it when we talk about this. Most organizations would want to plot themselves in some way or another, and they normally do that relative to their competition. So you have a framework that typically has a value advantage, what are we offering that the competition ain't offering, and a cost advantage. How well are we priced versus the competition? And then typically you have in this matrix service leaders, cost and service leaders, and commodity leaders. So your own organization will look at this and say, well, this is more or less where we are, there's our competition, there are the other players, but they're not really our competition. It gives you a sort of a bird's eye view of where you're placed in terms of the competitive landscape. And then you might have a goal, a vision, mission. The organization that we worked with here, their goal was to move from commodity leader into this space of superior customer service at lower cost, trying to dominate and play in the cost service leader matrix. The reasons for that shift is not important for this discussion. Just understand that you can make a decision to move beyond or between, or you can remain where you are and just say, I want to be better in terms of what I'm doing in that specific matrix. In this case, they wanted to do a complete transformation. So we start with all businesses. We are here, and we want to go there. And we want to do it over a space of 2 years. This is a typical strategic plan. You go to a strategic session, you must know this, you get the information, look at the competition, decide, bang, that's where we're going to go. You get some consultant that explains to you the difference between ideal future and current future and what you need to do by means of backcasting and put yourself there and look back at what you need to do. It's all fairly straightforward, line of thinking. With the exception that whatever you decide at the particular point in time when you decide it is only applicable for that specific time. It's only relevant for that space and time. And tomorrow it might change. Now there isn't a crystal ball, unfortunately. That I didn't come to bring you today. All I can confront you with is the fact that things change all the time and try and give you something that can help you to make the correct strategic decisions. Now the definition of the correct strategic decision that I gave to this organization was to check that your decision is appropriate and to check it in real time. Not quarterly, not 6 monthly, not annually, all the time. So then typically what you do is you draw up something like this. In this case, the company, it's a oil firm, they had the resources, have the resources still, and they basically integrated the information systems and they almost converged it with the physical structure of the organization. So this became very much live. And it's interesting what you can do by means of technology these days. If you have a cell phone, you're getting news updates on your cell phone all the time. Something 24 or news this or flip chart or flip boarding, constant feeds. So you can also link a whole lot of feeds to this. You don't necessarily need a lot of people that sit there and manually